Have you ever been with a man who made you feel like you could see into his soul, and yet something about him remained just out of reach? You felt his presence, his depth, his power, but you couldn't quite hold all of him. He gave you just enough to feel special, yet somehow he was always grounded in something deeper than you, deeper than love, deeper than approval. That kind of man stays with you. He doesn't need to perform. He doesn't chase validation. He doesn't explain himself. And the truth is he carries certain secrets that shape how women feel around him, secrets he doesn't reveal, not because he's being manipulative, but because power, real power, is quiet. And here's the paradox: the more a woman tries to know everything about him, the more she becomes captivated by what she can't name. In a world where we overshare to connect, these men do the opposite. They lead not by loudness, but by emotional clarity, restraint, and a powerful awareness of what they never give away. And that, right there, is what makes them unforgettable. Today, I want to take you on a quiet journey through the inner world of those men. The kind of men women long to understand but never fully can, and once you hear these 5 secrets, you'll never look at masculine power the same way again. Let's begin. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been with someone who made you feel like you were standing in front of a locked door, and all you wanted was the key? A man who didn't need to raise his voice to command the room, who didn't need to explain himself for you to feel him, who didn't tell you what he was going to do next, and yet you trusted he had already decided. This is not mystery for the sake of manipulation. This is not game playing. This is a kind of stillness that radiates strength. A man who keeps certain things to himself doesn't do it to deceive you, he does it to protect something sacred. Himself, his values, his inner compass. There's a quiet difference between a man who hides because he's afraid, and a man who holds back because he knows not everything should be given away. We live in a world where oversharing is almost expected. You meet someone for the first time, and within minutes you're hearing about their trauma, their heartbreaks, their therapy sessions. There's vulnerability everywhere, but so little structure, so little containment, and men, real men, have learned that containment is not suppression. It is the art of knowing what to share and what to hold, and that's the beginning of true power. The first secret that powerful men keep from women is this: they never tell you what really built them. You may think you know his story. Maybe you know he had a rough childhood. Maybe he lost someone close. Maybe he was humiliated once, rejected, silenced, abandoned. You might hear the headlines, but you'll never feel the full texture of what that pain did to him. Why? Because his story is not for your entertainment. His wounds are not for casual conversation. He has processed it, integrated it, and now it lives quietly inside him, not as a scar to be pitied, but as a muscle that taught him how to walk alone. He doesn't weaponize his past to control you. He doesn't wear it like a badge to gain your empathy. He doesn't bleed on you and then expect you to stitch him up. No, he bleeds inward, he heals quietly. And because of that, he walks into relationships already whole. You don't have to carry his pain, that's his. And that's part of what makes him feel so anchored. Women often say, he's so calm, so stable, so emotionally intelligent. What they don't always realize is what you're feeling is not just emotional intelligence, it's emotional sovereignty. It's the result of a man who sat with himself in silence, who felt the storm but didn't scream through it, who broke, but didn't expect someone else to fix him. And that's why when you meet a man like this, he doesn't rush, he listens, he doesn't panic when you cry. He doesn't need to overpower you when you disagree. His center is not easily shaken, not because he's cold, but because he already met his demons. And he made peace with them. That kind of man, he doesn't need to speak about what built him. You'll feel it when he looks at you. In the pauses, in his refusal to explain himself. That's the first secret, and here's the second one. He doesn't reveal what he's willing to walk away from. You see, a man rooted in power has clear boundaries, but he doesn't need to announce them. He doesn't need to scream, "I'm not tolerating this," when something feels off. He simply observes her and then exits when he knows he's crossed an internal line. It's not a test. It's not passive-aggressive. It's not a manipulation tactic to make you chase him. It's quiet, unapologetic, clear. He could be deeply in love with you and still leave. Not because he stopped feeling, but because he started seeing where he was no longer respected, where the connection became more about control than care, where the energy shifted from mutual nourishment to emotional survival. He won't threaten it. He won't throw it in your face, but you will feel the difference. He stops explaining himself. He withdraws emotionally, not as punishment, but as preservation, because his peace is not negotiable. And that right there is often where women get confused. Why didn't he fight for me? Why didn't he try harder? But the truth is, he did. Just not in ways you were used to. He fought by being consistent. He fought by being clear. He fought by showing up. Until it no longer made sense to. You see, a powerful man doesn't need to convince you to value him. That's not his job. He gives you the invitation, but he never begs you to accept it. That kind of man doesn't teach you how to love him. He simply is who he is, and if your nervous system isn't ready for that kind of stability, he won't wait for you to grow into it. He will release you, not out of anger, but out of alignment, because the man who knows what he's willing to walk away from doesn't get trapped by who he's afraid to lose. And women feel that deeply, even when they can't name it. They sense the boundaries they can't quite see, the emotional line they don't want to cross, and that's what makes him so desirable, because women aren't drawn to men they can control. They're drawn to men they can trust, but trust begins with containment, with self-respect, with mystery, not the kind that plays games, but the kind that says, "I know who I am, and not everyone gets access to it." And that brings me to the third secret, one that very few men talk about. He never reveals how much power he actually has. It's easy to assume that power is visible, the money, the muscles, the lifestyle, the charm, but real power, the kind that sits beneath the surface, it's quieter than you think. It's in the way he looks at you when you try to provoke him, and he doesn't flinch. It's in the way he remains calm when you're emotional, because he doesn't take your storm personally. It's in the way he chooses not to argue, because he knows winning the moment might cost the connection. His power is not dominance, it's choice. He chooses his responses, he chooses his words, he chooses whether you get a piece of his heart or just a glimpse. You will never know the full extent of his reach, his influence, his mind, because he doesn't lead with his resume. He doesn't need to. You'll know he's respected by the way others respond when he speaks. You'll feel his impact, not by the noise he makes, but by the way the room settles when he walks in. And if he gives you access to that world, it's a privilege, not a prize. He lets you in slowly, not because he's hiding something, but because he's learned that not every heart can hold his truth. That silence is safer than explanation, that clarity is more seductive than chaos. The woman who earns his trust won't even realize the full depth of what she's been given until much later. Because it was never about what he said, it was about how he made her feel safe, steady, challenged, seen. But never owned, never dependent, never consumed, because he knows, the moment you give your entire power away in love, you stop being a man. You become a projection, and he refuses to shrink for anyone. There's a moment that happens in almost every relationship with a powerful man. A woman realizes, maybe after months, maybe years, that there is a part of him she will never fully access. And in that moment something shifts, not always in a bad way. Sometimes it draws her in closer, sometimes it unsettles her. But it always awakens something deeper in her. It's a truth many women wrestle with quietly. This man loves me, but I do not possess him, and I never will. And that brings us to something that most people misunderstand about masculine energy. The power isn't in being mysterious. It's in being rooted. A powerful man knows how to hold paradoxes. He can be deeply loving and fiercely independent. He can nurture intimacy while still needing solitude. He can give his heart without giving his spine. And this is where many women get lost, not because they don't feel loved, but because they aren't used to love without dependency. When you're with a man who doesn't need you, who doesn't lean on you for validation, who doesn't fold under pressure to prove his emotions, it can feel almost too quiet. You may find yourself searching for emotional chaos, for highs and lows, for proof of passion, but passion in his world doesn't always look like fireworks. It looks like steadiness, like deep presence, like an unwavering sense of self, which leads us to the fourth secret. He never shows you the full map of his emotions. Now, don't confuse this with repression. A powerful man feels, often more deeply than you imagine, but he doesn't externalize everything. His feelings aren't flung onto others like emotional confetti. He experiences them inwardly, he processes them intentionally, and he expresses them selectively. Because here's what he's learned. When a man makes his emotions your responsibility, he creates imbalance. He gives away the leadership of his emotional world, and that, over time, erodes trust. He may tell you when he's hurting, but you won't see the full wave. You'll hear it in the quietness of his voice, in the way he pauses before responding, in the small ways he distances himself to protect what's still tender. You'll feel it, but you'll never quite be able to trace its shape, not because he doesn't trust you, but because he trusts himself more. His emotional maturity doesn't come from dumping everything on you. It comes from holding it, metabolizing it, and speaking about it with dignity. And if you've ever been in the presence of a man who can name his pain without demanding your pity, you know how powerful that is. You'll never see him cry and fall apart just to prove his vulnerability, but you may see a single tear when you least expect it. In silence, in reverence, and that one tear will say more than 1,000 words. There's a certain heartbreak that lives in powerful men, not from being unloved, but from being misunderstood, because we live in a culture that demands emotional performance from men, while simultaneously mocking them when they show it. So they learn to go quiet, to go inward, to build emotional intimacy with themselves first. And when they invite you into that space, it's not to save them. It's to witness them. That's a key difference. He doesn't need you to hold his brokenness. He needs you to respect his wholeness, even when he's hurting. But here's what most people miss. A man who doesn't share everything emotionally is not being distant. He's being discerning, and his discernment is part of what makes women feel emotionally safe with him. Because they know they won't be flooded, they won't be emotionally manipulated, they won't be made to parent a wounded child in a grown man's body. His restraint is a gift, one that's easy to overlook, especially if you confuse intimacy with exposure. But the truth is, exposure without depth is just oversharing, and depth without chaos is what powerful men master. And now there's one more thing I want to speak about, maybe the most haunting of all, the one secret that keeps him from being fully understood even by those who love him the most. He never tells you what he's truly afraid of losing, because fear in his world is sacred, not because it's absent, but because it's private. He may fear failure, he may fear irrelevance, he may fear becoming like his father, he may fear opening fully and not being met. But he doesn't make those fears a performance. He holds them like secrets between him and God, or silence, or fire. Why? Because what you fear most is what controls you, and a man who is ruled by fear can never lead. He can love, he can care, he can try, but he cannot lead. A powerful man chooses where to place his vulnerability. Not every part of him is on display, not every fear is up for discussion, and women, sensing this, often mistake it for emotional distance. But it's not. It's the architecture of his inner world, deliberate, quiet, unshaken, and let's be honest, it can feel unnerving. Because when you don't know what a man is afraid to lose, you don't know what power you really have over him. And maybe that's the point. You're not supposed to have that power. You're not supposed to feel like you can shake him with a single word. A powerful man doesn't give you that leverage, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity, because he's not here to be your emotional puppet. He's here to be your partner, and that requires limits, structure, inner anchoring, so no, he won't tell you what keeps him up at night. He won't confess every emotional shadow. He won't lay bare the parts of him that are still trembling. Because those things, those quiet terrors, are part of what drive him forward, and to give them away would be to risk diluting them. This is where the line gets drawn, between a man who shares everything to be understood and a man who shares enough to be known. And women feel this difference, not always with their minds, but with their bodies. They feel it in the way they lean into him instinctively, in the way they lower their voice when they speak to him, in the way they pause before speaking out of anger, because something about him calls for respect. Not obedience, not submission, respect. He doesn't demand it, he inspires it, and that, my love, is the kind of man who changes you. Because you don't just see him, you feel yourself more clearly in his presence, not because he reflects you, but because he holds the mirror still. And in his stillness, you see your own chaos, your own softness, your own longing to feel safe enough to stop performing. That's the paradox of power. The man who keeps the deepest parts of himself hidden often ends up giving you the clearest reflection of your own heart. Because the man who needs nothing from you frees you to choose him, and that is the rarest form of intimacy. There's a moment in every woman's life when she encounters a man who doesn't try to win her. He doesn't audition. He doesn't perform. He doesn't flood her with validation or sweet promises, and yet she feels more seen, more affected, more undone by his presence than by 100 voices shouting her name. It's not what he gives her, it's what he doesn't need from her. And that absence of need, that sacred space where he lets you come close without chasing, touch without clinging, connect without controlling, that space changes a woman. It forces her to face her own patterns, her own attachment to drama, her own fear of not being enough unless she is everything. And that's exactly what powerful men protect with more vigilance than anything else, their peace. They guard it not because they're selfish, but because they've paid for it. They've bled for it, they've had to tear themselves away from relationships where their presence was exploited. From jobs that killed their spirit, from habits that numbed their clarity, from expectations that didn't allow them to breathe. Peace, to a man who has lived through internal war, is sacred ground, and here's the truth, he doesn't always talk about it. But you can feel it in how he lives. He protects his time, he protects his energy. He doesn't chase drama or become addicted to adrenaline. He doesn't entertain people who disrespect his boundaries. He chooses silence over noise, clarity over chaos, solitude over superficiality. Women who aren't used to this mistake it for avoidance. Why is he so distant? Why doesn't he react when I try to test him? Why doesn't he care more? But what they don't understand is that a powerful man does care, deeply, but he doesn't feed dysfunction with attention. He doesn't reinforce chaos with energy. He doesn't reward manipulation with a response, and that's what disarms people. He doesn't engage to prove his worth, he disengages to protect it. His peace is not passive, it's not apathy. It's not emotional laziness, it's cultivated, chosen, and fiercely maintained. And it shows up in the small things, the way he handles conflict, the way he ends a conversation when it turns toxic, the way he doesn't need to respond immediately to every emotional demand. He's not avoiding intimacy, he's avoiding distortion because he knows something that takes many men years, sometimes lifetimes, to learn. Not all connection is sacred, not all chemistry is healthy, and not every woman who wants you deserves access to you. He chooses with intention. Not just who he sleeps with, but who he lets speak into his spirit, who he allows into his home, who he lets touch his energy. That's a man who understands value, not just financial value, but spiritual value. He knows that the most expensive thing he can give someone is access to him. And so, when a woman comes into his life, she will feel it, that he's not easily moved, that she's not walking into an open door, but into a sacred space, that she's not entitled to his full story, his full time, his full self, just because she's beautiful or interesting or available. No, she must earn it, not with manipulation, not with performance, not by becoming what she thinks he wants, but by being rooted in herself, grounded, respectful, present, because that kind of man doesn't just want love. He wants peace with love, he wants desire with depth, he wants fire without the forest burning down. And in a world that romanticizes the storm, he chooses the mountain, still, steady, silent, strong. There's another part of this that's hard to put into words, but I want to try. When a man chooses peace, he loses things. He loses popularity, he loses chaotic lovers, he loses people who only valued him when he was rescuing them, fixing them, overextending himself to meet their needs. He loses the crowd, the noise, the validation, and it's painful, it's lonely at first, but then something shifts. He starts to feel himself again, not the version of him that was constantly available, not the version that confused attention with affection, but the true version, the one who creates not for applause but for purpose, the one who builds not to be praised but to be free. And slowly life becomes quiet, focused, clean, the phone rings less, the circle shrinks, but the energy deepens. The mornings become sacred, the nights become restful, and the woman who enters this space, if she's wise, will realize she is not the center of his life. But she is welcome in it, and that invitation, unforced, unhurried, unchained, is more intoxicating than any chase. Because now, love is not about possession. It's about presence. He doesn't own you. You don't own him. You both choose every day from a place of wholeness, but here's the twist. Most people don't know how to relate to this kind of man. Because we are conditioned to crave inconsistency, to equate unpredictability with excitement, to feel alive in emotional roller coasters. So when we meet a man who doesn't play that game, it can feel unfamiliar. You might question, is there enough passion? Why doesn't he argue? Why is he so calm when I'm spiraling? But that calmness is not detachment. It is discipline. He chooses peace over power plays. He chooses clarity over chaos. He chooses love that doesn't hurt over love that proves itself through pain. And that, my love, is the secret. The most powerful men in the world, the ones who remain unforgettable to women long after the relationship ends, aren't the loudest, the richest, or the most charming. They are the ones who loved cleanly, who held their center, who never gave away their soul just to be chosen. They were powerful not because of what they did to women, but because of what they didn't allow women to do to them. They didn't allow manipulation, or disrespect, or emotional guilt trips. They didn't stay where they weren't valued. They didn't fight battles that drained them. They didn't keep proving themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. They simply walked away quietly with dignity, and that silence echoed louder than 1,000 explanations. Because a powerful man doesn't leave to punish. He leaves to protect himself, his vision, his legacy. And the woman who understands that, who doesn't try to pull him off his path, but walks beside him on hers, she gets something most never will. She gets to see the man behind the mystery, not because she demanded it, but because she became the kind of woman he didn't have to hide from. There's something quietly humbling about being with a man who doesn't flinch in the face of your fire. You test him, not even consciously at times. You raise your voice, you probe for weakness, you create small storms, just to see if he will chase, if he will fold, if he will beg for harmony. But he doesn't match your chaos. He just stands there watching, steady, rooted, and that stillness. It does something to you, because now the drama has nowhere to land, the theatrics have no stage. The roles you used to play, the girl who needs saving, the seductress who controls through emotion, the wounded healer, they stop working. He doesn't reject you, but he doesn't participate in your pattern either, and that's where transformation begins. Because the fifth secret every powerful man keeps from women is this: he's not reacting to you, he's managing himself. It seems simple, right? But it's rare. Most men, especially in relationships, respond from their ego, their hurt, their need to be understood. They argue not because the point matters, but because they feel unseen. They yell not because they're angry, but because they're afraid. They over-explain not for clarity, but for control. But a powerful man, he does none of that. His restraint isn't weakness, it's emotional precision. You'll see it when you're upset. You'll lash out, push him away, say something you don't mean. You're expecting him to raise his voice, to collapse, to escalate, but instead he breathes, he pauses, and in that pause he does something revolutionary. He doesn't make your emotion his responsibility. Not because he's cold, but because he knows the cost of taking on storms that aren't his. He'll hold space. He'll listen, but he won't be dragged into a performance of pain, because if he loses himself every time someone else is dysregulated, he ceases to be a man worth trusting. Women often say they want a man who's emotionally available, and yes, they do, but what they want even more, often unconsciously, is a man who doesn't collapse when they do. Because emotional availability without strength becomes fragility, and no woman, in her deepest feminine, wants to feel like the more emotional she becomes, the less masculine her man feels. A powerful man knows this, and so he trains himself not just in discipline or business or fitness, but in inner stillness. He doesn't react to everything. He doesn't jump to defend his point. He doesn't fear silence in conflict. In fact, sometimes he uses it, and that silence isn't punishment, it's sovereignty. Because when you can sit in discomfort without rushing to fix it, you reclaim a kind of power that most people have never tasted. You become untouchable not in the sense of being distant, but in the sense of being self-contained. And that, ironically, is what allows true intimacy to blossom. Because now the woman in his life doesn't feel like she has to perform to be heard. She doesn't feel like she has to scream to be felt. She begins to soften, to surrender, not to him, but to herself. Because his presence becomes a mirror, and not just any mirror. A clean one, a mirror that reflects without distortion, where she still overreacts, still grasps, still tests. And in that reflection she begins to evolve. That's what powerful men do, not by force, not by control. But by embodiment, they become the invitation for you to meet your higher self, and that's why being with a powerful man can feel uncomfortable at first. It's not that he's judging you, it's that he's not entertaining the version of you that doesn't serve you anymore. He sees the woman you could be, and he relates to her, and so, when you show up in your patterns, when you try to manipulate, or guilt, trip, or seduce out of fear, you'll feel the distance. You'll feel that wall, not because he's closed off, but because he's already chosen not to feed that version of you. He doesn't fight the old you, he just doesn't engage her, and in that quiet refusal he frees you to rise. To meet him where he already lives. But here's the most misunderstood part of all of this. People think powerful men are aloof, that they're emotionless, that they don't care, that they're avoidant, but that's not true. A powerful man feels everything. But he doesn't leak those feelings onto others, and this is crucial because what separates a powerful man from a performative one is containment. Containment is not suppression. It's not bottling things up until you explode. It's having an internal ecosystem so grounded, so clear, so regulated that your emotions have space to breathe inside of you before they land on someone else. So, when he speaks, he's already filtered out the chaos. When he loves, you feel stability beneath the passion. When he's hurt, you feel depth, not drama, and the woman who receives that kind of man, she may not always understand him. She may not always like his boundaries, but she will never feel unsafe in his energy. She'll know, deep in her nervous system, that she doesn't have to fight to be felt, that she doesn't have to rescue him, that she doesn't have to earn his attention every day just to feel like she matters. Because powerful men give with fullness, and when they choose you, it's not for a moment, it's not for the validation, it's not for the performance, it's because something in you reflected something in them, and they saw it, and they trusted it, quietly, deeply, without needing to shout it from the rooftops. So they give you the best they have, but they do not give you the last pieces of themselves, and this is where so many relationships fall apart. Because when a woman senses there's a part of him she can't touch, she may begin to push, to demand, to provoke, to try and own that last piece. But that last piece, that's where his soul lives, and no one owns that. Not even her. She's welcome to walk beside it, to honor it, to be invited into parts of it, but she will never fully hold it. Because that's the part of him that answers to something higher. That's the part that doesn't belong to relationship. That belongs to purpose, to mission, to legacy, and if she tries to possess it, she loses the man who carries it. Because a powerful man doesn't belong to anyone. He belongs to the future he's building, and only a woman strong enough to honor that gets to walk with him into it. There is a quiet heartbreak that lives inside powerful men. It's not loud. It doesn't cry out in pain or rage. It's the heartbreak of being seen by everyone and understood by almost no one. Because when a man carries himself with calmness, with integrity, with purpose, you would think people admire that. And many do, but others they project onto him. They see his boundaries as rejection, his solitude as arrogance, his clarity as coldness, and so over time he learns. Very few people can hold space for the whole of him. They can love the part that shows up, protects, provides, listens, but can they love the part that doesn't need them? The part that disappears into silence, the part that doesn't explain itself, the part that refuses to be owned. Because the last secret, one that most women never even realize they've encountered, is this: he doesn't tell you that he's already made peace with being alone. This is not the man who's afraid to be single, not the one who fills his calendar with distractions or keeps a rotation of lovers to feel alive. No, this is the man who can be in a room by himself for days and feel completely intact. He doesn't wither without attention. He doesn't spiral without contact. He doesn't need someone to be present to feel like he matters, because his self-worth is not externally sourced. It's not built on compliments or validation. It's carved from solitude, from long nights alone, from sitting with his own restlessness and not running from it. That's the kind of aloneness most people never reach, because it's not just about isolation, it's about intimacy. With self, with spirit, with silence, and when a man has gone that deep, he doesn't need relationship to feel full. He chooses relationship to feel expanded. That choice, it changes everything, because now he's not staying out of fear. He's not tolerating poor treatment just to avoid loneliness. He's not settling for almost just to feel wanted. He's already made peace with his own company, and unless your presence adds to his peace, it's not worth sacrificing his solitude. And that's why women feel something different with this kind of man. They feel it in his quiet gaze, in the way he holds eye contact without agenda, in the way he listens not to respond, but to understand. He's not chasing. He's not testing, he's not performing, he's simply there, and that presence is magnetic. Because it doesn't come from need, it comes from alignment. But here's the paradox: because he doesn't need you when he chooses you, it means everything. When a man who is deeply comfortable with himself invites you into his space, into his body, his thoughts, his energy, you begin to realize this isn't about filling a void. This is about sharing abundance, and that abundance doesn't always look like overflowing emotion. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like a deep breath. Sometimes it looks like a man choosing peace over being right, purpose over pleasure, vision over validation. But make no mistake, he feels, he loves, he aches, he just does it with intention, with direction, with devotion that is not scattered but steady, and you, as a woman, will feel that steadiness. You'll feel the shift in yourself, because when a man no longer needs you to complete him, he creates space for you to be fully yourself. You'll start to show up more grounded, more honest, less performative, because you're no longer reacting to his reactivity. You're responding to his rootedness, and suddenly the whole dynamic shifts. You're not chasing approval. You're not trying to prove your worth. You're not tiptoeing around his triggers. You're standing in front of a man who has made peace with every part of himself. And in doing so, he gives you permission to make peace with every part of yourself too. But here's what's difficult, what very few people prepare you for. Once you've been in the presence of a man like this, you can't go back. You can't unfeel that kind of safety. You can't forget what it feels like to be with someone who doesn't flinch when you unravel, who doesn't abandon you when you're too much, who doesn't pull you into his chaos just to feel close. You can't go back to men who need rescuing, who rely on you to be their mirror, their mother, their muse. Because this man, he doesn't need saving, he needs space, he needs respect, he needs partnership, not performance. And if you try to offer him anything less, you'll lose him. Not in a dramatic exit, not in screaming matches or slammed doors. He'll just fade quietly, cleanly, with grace, because men like this don't leave messes, they leave lessons. They don't destroy, they distill, they don't burn bridges, they build boundaries, and you'll spend months, maybe years, trying to articulate what it was about him that left such a mark. Was it his calmness, his refusal to argue, his silence in moments when you expected war? Or was it the way he made you feel when you were near him? Not adored, not idolized, not obsessed over, but seen without effort, loved without losing yourself, held without being gripped. And that is what real power feels like in a man, not possession, but presence. If you've ever stood in the presence of a man who has nothing to prove and everything to offer, you know that something in you changes. Something softens, something awakens, and something resists, because power like that forces you to look at yourself. Not the curated version, not the girl who smiles when she's hurting, not the woman who's built a fortress of independence around her longing, but the real you, the emotional you, the woman underneath the roles, the one who wants to be held, not handled. And the man who holds power quietly, who doesn't try to tame you, but also won't let you rule him. That man isn't easy to be with. He doesn't argue for the sake of connection. He doesn't keep the peace by betraying himself. He won't collapse into the emotional currents just because you want him closer. He won't soften when his strength is what you're actually drawn to. He sees you, but he doesn't revolve around you. He invites you, but he doesn't chase you. He touches your soul, but he'll never let you hold his center. And for a moment that might frustrate you. You may feel like you're kept at arm's length, like you're being given only 80% of the story. But what you'll realize is that the missing 20%, it's not a gap, it's a boundary, that part of him that remains untouched. That's the part he gives to God, to his purpose, to the fire inside him that burns not for you, not even for love, but for a mission that began long before you ever came. And when a man lives like that, he doesn't lose himself in a relationship, he leads from within it. You may never fully understand him, but you'll never forget him, because he doesn't demand anything from you. He evokes everything in you, he doesn't ask you to change. He lives in such integrity that you're called to change. And when he chooses you, it's not because he needs healing or rescue or escape. It's because something in you, your presence, your peace, your clarity, matched his. It's a partnership of sovereignty, not survival. It's love between two people who aren't looking to fill holes in each other, but to build something beyond either of them. And that love, it's quieter, but it's deeper, it's less dramatic, but it's more dangerous. Because once you feel it, once you're touched by that level of grounded masculine presence, no one else compares. You won't crave chaos anymore. You won't be impressed by loud declarations. You won't be moved by men who need you to hold them up. You'll crave depth, steadiness, stillness, that quiet knowing that you're with a man who would never need to control you because he already controls himself. And maybe that's the whole point. You see, these 5 secrets that powerful men keep, they're not about deception. They're about discipline, they're about discernment, they're about emotional mastery. They don't share everything, not because they don't trust you, but because they trust themselves to carry what's sacred. They don't argue every point, not because they're passive, but because they know silence often speaks louder. They don't open up every wound, not because they're closed, but because they've already done the work. And they don't need applause for their healing. They don't reveal their full depth of power not because they're hiding, but because real power never shouts. And they don't fear being alone, not because they're distant, but because they've made peace with themselves, and won't trade that peace for performance. These are the men who shift the atmosphere when they walk into a room, who don't ask to be followed but are, who don't need you to need them, but will offer you everything when you're ready to meet them. Not from your wounds, but from your wholeness. And you'll know when you've found one, because your nervous system will settle even when your mind doesn't understand why. Because you'll feel safe even when you're vulnerable, because you'll feel seen even in your silence. He won't try to fix you, but he also won't let you stay small. He won't chase you, but he'll never make you feel abandoned. He won't love you in the way you expect, but he'll love you in the way you've always needed, and in that love you'll rise. Not for him, but beside him, not to keep him, but to meet him, because now you understand power is not about being impenetrable. It's about being whole quietly, fully, unapologetically, and men who live like that are never forgotten. Not because of what they said, but because of who they refused to stop being even for love. So if you've ever met a man like this, don't try to unravel him. Honor him, don't try to unlock his secrets. Become the kind of woman who doesn't need to. And when you do, you may just find that the greatest secret he ever kept was how deeply he wanted to be met by someone who could see him without needing to own him. And now you've become that woman, and for the rest of your life you'll never love the same again.